Welcome to Uncovered Biblical History and Traditions, the channel dedicated to lost stories of the biblical past. Discover stories of pre-Christian historical roots, biblical legends, lost church history and forgotten historical characters of faith. It is very helpful if you hit the like, subscribe and share. Help build my channel and let's take a look together into these uncovered forgotten tales. Imagine, if you will, a scene so devastating that ancient historians struggle to find words adequate to describe it. Picture flames consuming an entire city as screams pierce the smoke-filled air. Now imagine that the ones wielding the torches and swords aren't foreign invaders, but desperate people pushed beyond their breaking point. Welcome to ancient Britain, 60 AD, where a warrior queen's rage would shake the mighty Roman Empire to its core. Today, we're diving into one of history's most brutal and tragic stories of resistance, the rebellion of Queen Boudica, a tale that would end not with triumph, but with a suicide that stunned two armies into silence. Let's begin with carnage so complete that the very ground seemed to thirst for blood. Londinium, modern-day London, was no small settlement in 60 AD. It was the beating heart of Roman commerce in Britain, a bustling metropolis packed with merchants from across the empire. Powerful Roman garrisons protected its wealth, and its streets echoed with the sounds of international trade. But on this particular day, those streets would echo with something far more sinister. When Queen Boudica's forces descended upon London, what followed wasn't a battle, it was systematic annihilation. The ancient historian Tacitus, known for his measured prose, couldn't hide his shock as he recorded that 40,000 Roman defenders and civilians were put to the sword. Not captured, not enslaved, killed outright. The assault was so thorough, so merciless, that later historians would struggle to explain how the typically noble British character could produce such devastating fury. But to understand this rage, we need to step back 18 years and witness what had been brewing beneath the surface of Roman-occupied Britain. Picture this, it's 42 AD, and Emperor Claudius has issued an edict that would forever change the spiritual landscape of Britain. The Romans, with their methodical efficiency, had embarked on a campaign of Christian extermination that would span nearly 2 decades. But this wasn't just religious persecution, it was cultural annihilation on an unprecedented scale. Imagine watching your temples burn, your libraries reduced to ash, your centers of learning demolished stone by stone. The Romans didn't simply conquer, they systematically erased British identity. Towns were razed with what witnesses described as barbaric insolence. The defenseless were massacred without mercy. Roman soldiers engaged in widespread plunder, seizing wealth, crops, and livestock with impunity. For 18 long years, the people of Britain endured what no other nation had experienced under Roman rule. Their religious institutions were destroyed, their cultural heritage obliterated, their very way of life under constant assault. It was a calculated campaign to crush not just rebellion, but the Christian faith and the British spirit itself. As one contemporary observer noted, people can stand only so much before their anger overwhelms their better judgment. The British were about to pay the Romans back in their own barbaric coin. Enter Boudica, a woman whose very presence commanded respect and fear in equal measure. Ancient sources describe her as majestic in appearance, rich in eloquence, and blessed with a military genius that would outmatch Rome's ablest strategists for 2 full years. She was, quite literally, a force of nature unleashed upon the Roman war machine. But what transformed this queen into an instrument of such devastating vengeance? The Romans had made a fatal error. In their arrogance, they had not only conquered her people but had personally violated her family, stripping away lands, wealth, and dignity in what history remembers as particularly treacherous transactions. When Boudica raised her war banner, it wasn't just about politics or territory. This was personal. This was about avenging 18 years of systematic brutalization, about protecting the Christian faith, and about preserving ancient British freedoms that Rome sought to extinguish forever. After the devastation of London, Boudica's fury was far from satisfied. Her forces, now swollen with volunteers seeking vengeance, swept onward to Verulamium, modern-day St. Albans. This important Roman stronghold was leveled with the same merciless efficiency that had characterized the London assault. Word of the approaching British army spread terror throughout Roman settlements. At Regnum and Rutupium, those who could flee did so, abandoning their homes to escape what seemed like an unstoppable tide of retribution. The destruction was so complete that chroniclers wrote of burning cities being quenched in blood. But perhaps most remarkable was Boudica's strategic brilliance. This wasn't mindless savagery, it was calculated warfare. She moved her forces westward with military precision, seeking to intercept the fleeing Roman commander-in-chief, Suetonius Paulinus. Multiple battles erupted across the British countryside, and according to the historian Dion, the Romans bore the heavy balance of disaster in each encounter. For 2 years, this British Amazon, as she came to be known, drove Roman legions before her armies, like sheep to the slaughter. Rome's finest military minds found themselves consistently outmaneuvered by a queen who preferred death to the sacrifice of freedom. But even the most brilliant military campaigns can turn on a single moment, and Boudica's would meet its end in the most unexpected way imaginable. The year was 62 AD. The location, Flinter, near what is now Newmarket. 2 massive armies faced each other in what everyone knew would be the decisive confrontation. From dawn to dusk, the battle raged with savage intensity. Neither side could gain a lasting advantage as the tide of combat ebbed and flowed like a deadly ocean. As darkness began to fall, something went wrong in the British ranks. A section of Boudica's army, including the Queen herself, became separated from the main force. In the chaos and failing light, Boudica believed herself trapped, cut off from her supporters and facing imminent capture. For a woman who had witnessed 18 years of Roman brutality, who had seen what happened to those who fell into Roman hands, the prospect of capture was unthinkable. Rather than face the despoliation and violence she knew would follow, Queen Boudica made a choice that would echo through history. In her final act of defiance, she took her own life on the battlefield. What happened next is perhaps one of the most extraordinary moments in military history. As news of Boudica's suicide spread through both armies, something unprecedented occurred. Romans and Britons alike stood stunned, overwhelmed by the tragedy of this incredible climax. The fighting simply stopped, not by command, not through negotiation, but through the mutual recognition that something profound had just occurred. Both armies withdrew to their encampments in what witnesses described as unbidden consent. The woman who had terrified Romans in life now awed them in death. A great sadness descended upon her people, while even their enemies gazed upon the scene with a mixture of shame and fear. Here was a leader so formidable that her death alone could silence the clash of arms across an entire battlefield. The Romans, ever pragmatic, quickly seized upon this moment of British demoralization. Peace negotiations with the Iceni tribe resulted in terms so generous they revealed just how desperately Rome wanted this conflict to end. Every confiscated piece of royal and noble wealth was restored. Stolen estates were returned to surviving family members with all original privileges intact. The treacherous transactions that had helped spark the rebellion were cancelled outright, and Rome even paid a heavy indemnity to the Iceni people. As one Roman historian would later observe, every peace with the British was a signature of defeat. These weren't the terms of victors dictating to the conquered, these were the desperate concessions of an empire that had been brought to its knees by one extraordinary woman. But perhaps the most fitting tribute to Boudica's legacy stands today on Westminster Bridge in London, the very city she once reduced to ashes. The magnificent statue erected in her memory captures her exactly as the ancient Roman writer Dion Cassius described her, standing erect with spear in one hand, the other controlling 2 rearing war horses, her coronet gleaming and her long hair flowing in the wind. Her 2 daughters kneel beside her in the war chariot, while the wheels display the terrible side weapons that were uniquely British and absolutely dreaded by Roman forces. It's considered one of the finest statues in the world, depicting what the sculptor envisioned as Christian Britannia on the shores of England, forever defying the evil powers of the world. Even the landscape preserves her memory. Throughout the battlefields where she fought, place names still echo the violence of those days: Hill of Arrows, Hill of Carnage, Hollow of No Quarter, Field of the Tribunal. A monolith called the Stone of Lamentation still marks the spot where tradition says she took her own life. But here's what makes this story even more remarkable: Boudica's death didn't end the resistance. The peace Rome negotiated with the Iceni had no effect on other British tribes. In the north and west, new leaders emerged. Arviragus, Venusius, and a gallant new war chief called Galgacus continued the fight with unabated determination. The spirit Boudica had embodied, the refusal to submit, the willingness to sacrifice everything for freedom, lived on long after her funeral pyre had burned to ash. According to witnesses, including the missionary Joseph of Arimathea and his co-workers, who observed these events as sorrowful spectators, the Christian faith and British independence were preserved for posterity through these ultimate sacrifices. If you would like further context and the rest of the story, check out previous videos and future videos. If you would like more information where to research this subject, pause this image and look into these resources or find resources in description. If you have book sources or links of your own on this subject, please share in comments or email me. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this forgotten biblical story. Leave a like, comment, share and subscribe. This is very helpful. Join me next time for another lost story of our biblical history. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.